farmers, trust is everything. At Genesis Fertilizers, we're not just proposing to build a facility, we're building a future designed for you. With real progress already underway, we're closer to providing Western Canadian farmers with a reliable, locally produced fertilizer supply. Now is the time to take control of your farm's future. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
Right now, we're going to talk to Jody Lawrence from Strategic Trading Advisors. He is out of Nashville, Tennessee, but he joins us right now out of North Carolina, where he's, of course, like he's always doing, talking to growers. Hey, Jody, how are we doing?
I'm great, John. How are you today?
Man, I'm doing.
How are you? Glad, appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, great to chat with you again, as always. And Jody, there's a lot happening in this market. I guess you do a lot of grower meetings where you're talking face to face, giving presentations on the markets across the U.S. And that gives you a really good opportunity to have those sidebar conversations with growers where they come up to you afterwards and ask you a bunch of follow-ups. What are some of the main things you're hearing from a question perspective from growers right now?
What is the catalyst? Where is the optimism in these markets? Because as you know, and the whole agriculture industry is built on a base of optimism because there's so many uncontrollable factors, the weather, certain costs, what's going to happen in the markets. But everybody wants to find what's that silver lining. Everybody understands the black cloud that we're in right now, or certainly is approaching, and we've been under, for about seems like the last, at least, it's 18 months. And they're looking for that event. And I try to point out that the sustainable aviation fuel and 45Z, that's still a wild card that's out there. Is it an enormous unknown black swan event if that starts to turn into a positive demand driven issue for domestic soybean production? And it's certainly not an unknown, but then you go into what happened yesterday in between the conflicting news reports. One of them said that Treasury Department was not going to decide on 45Z, and then another news Reuters, I believe, came out and said no, that statement was wrong, that the Biden administration and the Treasury Department is going to make a decision and get 45Z passed before the end of the year, or at latest before inauguration. So that to me, it revolves a lot around the used cooking oil imports, the dollar tax credit, but the positive thing, that's what everybody wants. And I understand this. We've all been in the industry so long that we're all built on optimism. And that's the thing that I see that I'm hopeful about. It's not weather related, because I think simply South America's weather, this no Nino year growing season that they're in, we're getting past the point of no return, that even if it turns hot and dry towards the end, you're not going to make a significant difference in their bean crop. So the optimism is what everybody wants to have, some to have a ring to hold on to, and that's the SAF program.
Yeah, but and Jody, as everyone looks for that bullish catalyst, we see that the Purdue CME Ag Barometer, very positive. I think it was the most positive month since like 2021. And the markets, like if you look at, like, just pick on corn for a second. Like, isn't it a kind of a positive, maybe a good news story? We got March 25 in the near month, corn trading about 431. At the time of us having this discussion. I can remember like 6 months ago, there was people talking about 350, 325. We've done a lot better, considering there's been a lot of, you think about the where this year's corn crop in the U.S. worked out to be. We've held up pretty good, haven't we, considering all the kind of the bearish tone to a lot of things that we've experienced in 24?
Absolutely. And that's a great point, because you look back to the September futures first notice day, and I'm looking at a chart that right before first notice day, when farmers were forced to either roll or sell whatever they had already delivered or had in store from the 23 crop at the elevators. The market's bottomed out, and this is just the March contract right at, let's just call it 404. And then we put in, a full 45, 47 cent rally. We're in the upper third of that now, 30 cents off that low. So it's holding up well. And you look at today's ethanol number, we are running at a pace to use somewhere between 5.55 and 5.6 billion bushels of U.S. corn for ethanol consumption, and that's going to be a record. There's certainly not a demand issue for corn. Corn issue is the 183 record national yield, and there's just too much of it because had we just had, it's always funny to say this because this year should be a victory lap for all of our meetings, for these shows, for everybody we talk to. We should be going out and patting every farmer we see on the back. Congratulations. This is the first time in a long, long time that we've produced two back-to-back record crops, corn crops on bushel per acre yield. And when you look at the bigger picture of it, the weather hasn't been, perfect, far from being perfect in 23 and 24. But yet like you said, we've got an oversupply problem right now. We've got a demand working its way through and a corn market right now that's really being held back by low bean prices because of what's going on in South America and China's economic problems, and that Russia and Ukraine wheat is so cheap and they're just flooding the market with it. I think it's a valid point to say March, May corn could easily be 450 to 470 if they were trading in their own bubble.
Interesting. Global veg oil complex. Of course, a lot of our listeners very interested in soybeans, a lot of canola growers, veg oil demand. What have you seen in that respect?
This goes back to the bright spot of SAF and sustainable aviation fuel, that whatever the new trade policy is going to be through Trump and whatever the new EPA chairman or Secretary Zellman takes towards biofuel, that bean oil use and corn used for ethanol is going to be right in the crosshairs, unfortunately, of what we think is about to happen. The world bean oil use is good, not great, but there's so many beans that it's impossible for the population growth and the demand growth, with China's economy being bad and population growth slowing, especially now that we're 5 years, hard to believe, almost 5 years after COVID, that we are now at a situation where just normal trendline yields will outproduce the growth of what world demand growth is, how that also compares. So, the numbers aren't terrible if you took them and said, okay, if we had normal production, if you didn't have record U.S. yield, if you had a record yield of 178 instead of 183 in corn, if you had Brazil producing last year's crop was a record and not potentially 660 million more bushels. The real issue that we are seeing on everything is that the genetics, the practices, the equipment, the technology, when you get the right amount of water and weather, the industry can do such a fantastic job that we can outproduce ourselves in a very cannibalistic nature, unfortunately. And that to me is the bigger problem. The bigger problem is the production. It's not the demand.
Is there any concern, or is the soybean market at all reacted to the involvement of RFK Jr. in the administration and his, pretty strong position against seed oil use? Is that kind of a wait and see from a market perspective? What have you heard there?
I'm trying to balance where I, now that we have, a lot of the smoke is cleared. If you just take Elon Musk and the government efficiency with Ramaswamy, let's start at the top. If that truly is, if he's going to have a lot of influence over every secretary in every department, then government cuts, budget cuts, things like that, work their way through all of it. Now, when you get to uh, Kennedy and his positions on so many issues that are extreme in either party, not not
Yeah.
just the fact that he is clearly the Kennedy name is a democratic iconic name who he became what more moderate, I guess, in their terms, and now you would even consider him kind of a fringe Republican. A lot of stuff that he thinks, so he's really hard to figure. My hope is, and all that, then you go over to Zellman and the EPA policy about we're going to be about domestic food production rather than biofuel production. That who is where's the pecking order in this? If it starts with Musk and everybody else begins to take a back seat, that efficiency in their departments is part of it. But if Zellman and all the trade guys, it's tariffs without using tariffs as a hammer in negotiation? Is it trade wars with China simply to get them the carrot on the end of the stick would be phase one participation? There's so many unknowns that I would love for all of your listeners to be able to give them an answer that okay, this guy is, and I'm going to use at the risk of really bad pun here, whose voice in that room trumps the other voices.
Yeah.
And who has President Trump said, okay, he's not my chief of staff, but is Musk the most important person? And then Kennedy has to defer to him in some capacity, and Zellman, and you just work your way down the list of appointees.
Yeah, and I think with so much focus on the slogan "America First," I just have a hard time believing that we're going to make some sort of big move on eliminating seed oil use in some foods, and that's a benefit to, say, Brazilian tallow imports. No matter how you feel about seed oils versus tallow, I don't think that flies either as a policy. Like, hey, we're going to hurt the American soybean grower. We're going to import a whole bunch of Brazilian tallow. That because I just that to me is where the rubber hits the road, and I'm a little less. I'm not confident that that one's gonna fly. But that's how I look at it.
Well, and you look at it simply from a political standpoint. Trump did what he felt like he had to do, that he had to make some sort of deal with Kennedy to get his endorsement.
Yeah.
Because that was part of the wild card. And in retrospect now, it doesn't look like the Kennedy votes were the ones that swayed, Trump to such a decisive victory. But this whole political process, it's about who ultimately is going to be able to make the better deal. And for now, I've got to think yeah, it's like you said, I think it's logistically impossible for us to say from a health standpoint, okay, we're done. We are not going to do this anymore. We are changing every company that makes it, because I can just see Kennedy going in and sitting at a board meeting of Kraft and saying, oh, by the way, you literally have to change the process by which you make every food that you make.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine the response from the board of directors in those cases. Hey, Jody, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really do appreciate it, and it was great to catch up with you when we were in Oxford on that little bit of a road trip at the Ole Miss versus Oklahoma game, and hopefully we get a chance to connect soon.
Absolutely, Sean. Anytime, any road trip we're up for. And wish everybody, if I'm not back on before the holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year to everybody. And have a safe season.
Yeah, same to you, my friend. Same to you.